let's learn how to graft an I-cord to something else. Now that could be to another I-cord, it could be to anything that has the same amount of stitches. So we have 4 stitches that we're going to graft together to make one continuous object. That's pretty seamless. So for this particular little sample I have here, this is the top of a tank top where it goes from the body into 2 triangles and then into straps. And then on the back of the tank top, there's 2 triangles that end before you make straps. So you'll end up with something kind of like this. So this is the front of your tank top, this is the back of your tank top, and then your I-cord will join, and then you'll have a little strap there. So that'll be the front of your tank top joining the strap to the back. My supplies are 2 DPN needles. One is on the I-cord strap. One is waiting for me to take my circular needle that I was working in the round in my project with, and then put them on this, put the little stitches on this DPN. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now and take out my working circular needles of whatever you're using. And then I have a yarn needle and scissors. So I don't need my little working needles anymore, so I'm gonna put those off to the side. Now I have my 2 DPNs ready for grafting. So just for visual's sake, I changed out my yarn color with a little magic knot. This is going to be the same yarn color that you're using, so it would just be this like white ivory color. Now as far as your tails go, this working yarn for your live stitches is what you're going to be grafting with. You don't really need a long tail here, so I'm going to trim this up a little bit just so that I have something to weave in really securely, but I'm not going to be using this to graft with. Let's flip the back of our tank top to the purl side and put the working yarn that we're going to graft with off to the right, and scooch these stitches down to the right side of our needle. And we're going to do a little sandwich here and put our I-cord strap right on top of it. So let's thread our yarn to our yarn needle. With Kitchener stitch, there's 2 little setup stitches to begin before you go into a little 4-step repeat. So the 2 setup steps are going through the first stitch on the front needle purlwise, and I always have my working yarn around here. I'm never pulling it over my needles or around the back or anything. The next step is to go through the first stitch on the back needle knitwise. Give that a little tug. And then now we can begin our 4-step repeat for Kitchener stitch. The first step is to go through the first stitch on the front needle knitwise and then take that off. And then go through the next stitch on the front needle purlwise. And leave it on. Go through the next stitch on the back needle purlwise and then take it off. Give that a little tug. And then go through the next stitch on the back needle knitwise and leave it on. And that is our 4-step repeat for Kitchener stitch. For the 4 stitches that we originally had, we're going to repeat that 3 total times, so twice more, and then we'll be left with just 2 stitches. If you only had 3 stitches on each needle to graft, you would only repeat this twice more. So you would go 1 more time for that 4 steps, and then you'll be left with those 2 stitches. So to go again, we're going to go through the first stitch on the front needle knitwise and then take it off. Then we're going to go through the next stitch on the front needle purlwise and leave it on. Then we're going to go through the first stitch on the back needle purlwise and take it off. it a little tug. And then we will go through the next stitch on the back needle knitwise and leave it on. And then repeat that once more. Go through the first stitch on the front needle knitwise and then take it off. Go through the next stitch on the front needle purlwise and leave it on. And then go through the first stitch on the back needle purlwise and then take it off. Once you get to these last two stitches, you'll have to hold on to the needles a little bit more carefully because they're going to want to fall out of the last two. And then go through the next stitch on the back needle knitwise and leave it on. So this is where you're going to end with those last two stitches. And to finish the Kitchener stitch, we're going to knit the last stitch on the front needle and then purl the last stitch on the back needle like that, and then just pop those two DP out and pull that through. So now we have a little messy Kitchener stitch. So this is where the contrast yarn comes in handy. We can see exactly where that is, and you can tell like where it needs to be tightened up. So at this point, I like to turn things around right side up and facing me, and then I can take inventory of what's going on here. So I'm going to take a little bit of a look. Now you won't have this knot here, and things will all be one color, so try to ignore that a little bit. I like to keep my needle around and go through and tighten up. So I'm going to start where I started over here and just kind of pull through. So I'm going to begin here and pull things along a little bit, or I'll begin here. And just take my needle and tug a little bit through each stitch to tighten it up. I don't want to pull too tight. I want to kind of mimic the size of the other stitches. And then that last stitch, you don't want to pull too tight there. And now the front two are looking really good. That's the only first two that you're going to really see, because turning it around, we're going to join some stuff here. This tail end, we can pull that, and that should tighten up the end there. We can now weave these two ends in to make this a little bit more seamless. Now at this point, you could just weave some stuff in. You're not going to see it very much. This is the back of the work, so it's not a big deal. But to make it as seamless as possible, you can join straight across. So this stitch and this stitch are buddies and they match up. So I'm going to, this grafted yarn that I'm working with is coming out and under from this stitch here. So it's going to go under and out from that stitch next to it. So we're going to match things up there, and that will help you close things up when you, it'll help you close up this gap when you start to weave in your ends. I'm going to take out my yarn and then put my needle on my tail yarn from my I-cord strap and do the same thing. So this stitch, this yarn is coming from this stitch and making a little half stitch here. To complete that stitch, I'm going to go through this here to join those two areas. So go in from this side, and then those are joined. So how I like to weave in the ends for this is in opposite directions. So this yarn is kind of going upward to me, and this yarn is kind of going downward to me. So I like to do that so then I don't have two strands of yarn going up and then making this bulkier than it needs to be, or two strands going down and making this area bulkier than it needs to be. So I like to put one yarn in each direction and weave it in really in however way you like to. So I'm going to maybe bring in my yarn maybe around, let's see, here. Kind of just hide it if you can. And I like to bring it up through my I-cord to call that good for now, and I'll trim that end. And then if you give it a little tug, that end will then just kind of pop to the inside there, and then now you can't see it at all. So to weave in this end down here, let's put the yarn needle on, and I'm just going to kind of take a little bit of a look and see what I can match up and what looks the best. So if I have a half stitch here, this would normally go up and connect over here. So I might bring it down this way. Again, no one's gonna be seeing this really up close, so you can just do whatever seems the best to you for that moment and makes it look neat. I like to weave in around the edges a little bit, so I'm gonna run my needle through here, and this is kind of where, if you have a sharper needle, this is a pretty dull needle. If you have a sharper needle, sometimes I really like a sharp needle for weaving in ends, because then you can split some yarns and make things really secure. So I probably would have threaded it through another stitch up there to make that a little bit more secure and less of a loop there, but that's okay for now. So just weave in your end and then you'll be good. So cut it, and then you'll have a really seamless little Kitchener stitch. Again, you won't have this knot here, so that'll look even better. And then a little tip, if you've got, say, a gap or like a little bump running along the underside of your I-cord, like you can see where there might be a ladder. If it was super loose, there might be kind of like just a ridge of something that was sticking out a little bit more from when you're bringing your yarn around the side when you're doing an I-cord. You can roll this kind of like Play-Doh and stretch it a little bit, and it should smooth out and kind of make that ladder go away. So I like to do that. And then that is, I'm going to trim that, and then that is the end of your I-cord join. And by matching things up when they're on the needles, you will have a very perfect line. You're not going to have anything twisted, and then the join will be virtually seamless.